I slouched on Patrick's old couch, fiddling with the glass of wine in my hand. Across from me, Nick sat, looking way too calm for what we were about to do. He ran a hand through his hair, then fiddled with the rings he'd just taken off, setting them on the table. Patrick was behind the camera, fiddling with the settings as usual, muttering to himself. "All right, boys," he finally said, peeking out from behind the lens, "whenever you're ready." My heart pounded. I'd done this scene 100 times before, kissing women, men, anyone really, but somehow this felt different. I glanced at Nick, forcing a smile. "You ready?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He just smirked, leaning back on the couch. "You tell me, Oliver, you're the actor here?" Cocky bastard. I rolled my eyes, taking a deep breath. This was just another scene. Nothing to it. I reached out, took Nick's face in my hands. His skin was warm, stubble rough against my palm. I hesitated, feeling that damn camera lens burning into the side of my face. Patrick coughed, reminding us he was still there. "Okay," I whispered. "Here we go." Nick didn't move, didn't blink. He just waited. And for a second I thought about backing out. But then I leaned in, closing the gap between us until our lips met. The kiss started off scripted, just as we rehearsed, but then something shifted. His lips pressed against mine, not soft or delicate like I expected. More, certain, confident. And it hit me hard. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't just a kiss. It was a goddamn jolt to my system. Patrick, the professional he was, let us go on. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. I was breathing him in, tasting the wine on his lips, feeling his hand slide up to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. "Cut!" Patrick barked, his voice slicing through the moment like a knife. I jerked back, almost dropping my glass. "Good," Patrick said, barely glancing at us as he reviewed the footage on his camera. "Really good. Let's reset for the next take." I nodded, avoiding Nick's eyes as I sat back, trying to pull myself together. My pulse raced and I didn't dare look at him. What the hell just happened? Nick cleared his throat, reaching for his rings. "Not bad, ha," he grinned, slipping them back on. "Told you it'd be easy." "Yeah," I muttered, still feeling the buzz from that kiss. Easy. But it wasn't. Not even close. After the shoot, I went straight home, my mind running circles around what just happened. I slammed the door behind me, tossed my keys on the kitchen counter, and headed to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection. What the hell was that, I muttered to myself. It wasn't like I hadn't kissed someone before plenty of times on stage and off, but this felt off. No, not off, different. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the trance. I pulled it out and saw Patrick's name on the screen. "Yo, what's up?" I answered, trying to sound casual, normal. "Just checking in," he said. "How are you feeling after the scene?" "Fine." "Why wouldn't I be?" I replied, a bit too quickly. He laughed, a low, knowing sound. "I done know, man. It looked intense from where I was standing. You guys really went for it." "It's called acting, Patrick. That's what we do." I was deflecting, and I knew it. He probably did too. "Sure," he said, not pushing further. "Well, it was great work. I think it's going to be the best scene in the film." Yeah. Thanks. I hung up before he could dive deeper, not ready for that conversation. I threw the phone on the couch and ran my hands through my hair. Acting, I repeated to myself. That's all it was. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, needing something to calm my nerves. The room was too quiet, so I flicked on the TV, letting the noise drown out my thoughts. An hour later, I was still staring blankly at the screen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nick's face inches from mine, felt the press of his lips. Heard his calm, steady breathing. I groaned, grabbing my phone again. I needed to do something, anything to push this out of my head. My fingers hovered over Nick's contact, my heart pounding. Why was I so worked up about this? I opened our chat and stared at the blank message screen. I don't be an idiot, I thought, but before I could stop myself, I typed out a quick text. "Hey, good work today, you all right?" I hit send and immediately regretted it. I tossed the phone aside, pacing the room. God, I was acting like some love-struck teenager. This was just a scene. A damn scene. A few seconds later, the phone buzzed. I snatched it up, seeing Nick's reply. "All good, you." Short, simple, yet I could almost hear his voice saying it. I hesitated before responding, thumbs hovering over the screen. How the hell was I supposed to answer that? What was I supposed to say? That the kiss had rattled me in ways I didn't understand. "Yeah, I'm good," I typed back, feeling the lie settle in my chest. His reply came quick, almost like he'd been waiting. "Cool. See you tomorrow." I blinked at the screen. Tomorrow, right. Another day, another rehearsal. I forced myself to text back, "Yeah, see you then." I dropped the phone and exhaled, sinking onto the couch. I was just overthinking it. That's all. It was just a kiss, just acting. But as I sat there, the memory of it kept replaying in my mind, stubborn and unrelenting. Something had shifted in that moment, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. I needed to clear my head. I needed to focus. I grabbed the remote and turned the volume up, trying to drown out the doubts swirling in my mind. The next day at rehearsal, I showed up early, hoping to shake off the weird tension from yesterday. The studio was quiet, the kind of calm that usually helped me focus. I paced around, reading over my lines, trying to keep my mind strictly on the script. Nick strolled in a few minutes later, casual as ever. He shot me a grin like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Morning, Oliver." "Morning," I muttered, eyes fixed on the paper in my hands. I wasn't sure how to act around him now, so I stuck with what I knew, keep it professional, keep it light. He dropped his bag and walked up beside me. "You good?" "Yeah, just running lines," I said quickly. I forced a smile, hoping it looked normal. "Ready for today?" Nick shrugged. "Always." I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension building up inside me, but every time I opened my mouth I felt that kiss hovering in the background like some unwelcome guest. So I stuck to the script literally. "Let's go over scene 4, I suggested, flipping pages. Nick watched me for a beat, his eyes narrowing slightly like he was reading something off my face. "Sure," he said finally, grabbing his copy. "Scene 4 it is." We went through our lines, and for the first time in a long time I felt off my game. My delivery was stiff, my movements awkward. I avoided eye contact as much as possible, focusing on every prop, every line, anything but him. "Cut," Patrick called from across the room, irritation clear in his voice. "Oliver, what's going on? You're not in it today." "I'm fine," I snapped back too quickly. "Just warming up." Patrick sighed, rubbing his forehead. "All right, take a minute. Get yourself together." I nodded, stepping away, feeling the burn of frustration in my chest. I headed to the corner of the room, pretending to fiddle with the script. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nick walking over. "Great," I thought, bracing myself. "You okay?" he asked quietly, hands shoved into his pockets. I glanced at him, then back at my script. "Yeah," I said, "I'm fine." "It doesn't seem like it," he replied, his voice calm, too calm. Like he wasn't rattled at all, like that kiss meant nothing to him. I felt a flare of anger, hot and sudden. "Well, it is," I shot back, finally looking him in the eyes. "I'm here to work, so let's just do that." He raised an eyebrow, holding my gaze. Right, work. There was a hint of something in his tone, but I couldn't pin it down. Amusement? Annoyance? It pissed me off either way. We went back to the scene, and I forced myself to focus. We ran through the lines again, and this time I pushed every ounce of emotion into it, trying to drown out the confusion and tension boiling inside me. It worked, sort of. I managed to get through the scene without stumbling, but I still felt his eyes on me the entire time, watching, waiting. "Better," Patrick called out, nodding. "That's more like it." Nick stepped back, giving me a small nod. "Nice," he said simply, turning to grab his bag. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." I gave a curt nod, biting back the urge to say something more. I watched him walk out, casual as ever, and for a split second, I hated him for how easy this seemed for him, for not feeling the same tangled mess I was. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the closed door. This is just a job, I reminded myself. Just another scene, another role. I wasn't about to let some stupid kiss derail me. No way. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. It was already happening, and I had no idea how to stop it. Rehearsals dragged on over the next few days. I kept my head down, buried in the lines and blocking, avoiding anything that might hint at the growing chaos in my mind. Nick, on the other hand, moved through each scene effortlessly, tossing me a smile or a joke now and then like everything was business as usual. It drove me nuts. Patrick noticed, of course. He always did. After our third take of the morning, he called for a break and motioned me over. I sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable. I followed him into the hallway, out of earshot of Nick and the crew. "What's up?" I asked, crossing my arms defensively. Patrick leaned against the wall, studying me. "You tell me, Oliver. You've been off lately. And don't give me the 'I'm fine' speech. I'm not buying it." I shrugged, looking anywhere but his face. "It's nothing, just work stress." He snorted, shaking his head. "Bullshit. Is it Nick?" The question hit me like a slap. My eyes darted to his, and he nodded like he'd just confirmed something. "You knew it," he muttered. "Look, I've been your friend long enough to see when something's eating at you. What's going on?" I wanted to brush him off, to keep up the act, but the words were tumbling out before I could stop them. "It's just that kiss," I confessed, lowering my voice. "It's screwing with my head. I thought it would be just another scene, but now I can't stop thinking about it. About him." Patrick listened, arms crossed, face serious. "So you're into him," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "It's not that simple," I snapped, pacing back and forth. "I mean, I don't even know what I'm feeling." I paused, swallowing the rest of that sentence. I'd never felt this way before, and admitting it out loud terrified me. "Oliver, you've got to face this," Patrick said firmly. "Feelings aren't neat, and they don't follow a script. Trust me, the more you ignore this, the worse it'll get." I stopped, staring at him, a mix of anger and fear bubbling up inside. And what am I supposed to do? Just walk up to him and say, "Hey, by the way, that kiss messed with my head, and now I'm losing my damn mind"? That's not happening. "Why not?" Patrick challenged. "What are you so afraid of?" I opened my mouth, ready to fire back with a dozen reasons, but nothing came out. What was I afraid of? Nick's reaction? What it would mean for our working relationship? Or was it the fact that admitting it meant facing a part of myself I'd been shoving into a box for years? Patrick watched me struggle, his expression softening. Listen, man. I'm not saying you have to do anything right now. Just be honest with yourself at least. It's okay to feel confused. I clenched my jaw, the words swirling in my head. Honest with myself. Easier said than done? I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to say more without losing it. I need to get back, I muttered, turning away. Yeah, sure, Patrick said, stepping back. Just think about it, all right? You owe that much to yourself? I didn't reply as I walked back into the studio. Nick glanced up from his phone, giving me a curious look. I forced a grin, waving it off. Patrick was just being dramatic, I lied, picking up my script again. You know how he gets. Nick chuckled. Yeah, classic Patrick. He dropped his gaze back to the script, seemingly unfazed. I watched him for a moment, the doubt clawing at me. Patrick was right. I was scared, confused, and the more I tried to act normal, the worse it got. But what was I supposed to do? Risk everything by opening up to Nick, by facing the storm inside me? No, I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. All right, I said, clearing my throat. Let's get back to work. But even as we ran the next scene, his words and Patrick's pressed against my skull like a ticking clock, reminding me that I couldn't run from this forever. Something had to give, and sooner or later I'd have to decide what that would be. The days blurred together after that conversation with Patrick. I threw myself into work, rehearsals, anything to keep busy. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape what had been said. The what-ifs kept creeping in, whispering in the back of my mind, gnawing away at my focus. And then there was Nick, always there, laughing, joking, completely unaware of the storm he'd stirred up inside me. One evening after rehearsal, I found myself standing outside the studio, phone in hand, staring at Nick's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. I had to get this out of my system somehow. I took a deep breath and pressed the button before I could chicken out. It rang twice. Hey, Oliver, what's up? Nick's voice came through, casual and light. I cleared my throat, trying to sound equally relaxed. Hey, I was thinking you want to grab a drink? Just hang out, you know. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Sure, sounds good. Meet at that bar around the corner. Yeah, see you in 10. I hung up, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I needed to get closer to figure out what the hell I was feeling. The bar was dimly lit, buzzing with conversations and the clinking of glasses. I grabbed a table in the corner and ordered a couple of beers. When Nick walked in, he spotted me and grinned, weaving his way through the crowd. Hey, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I didn't take you for the let's grab a drink after work type. Not that I'm complaining. I forced a laugh. Yeah, well, just felt like blowing off some steam. I took a swig of beer, trying to steady my nerves. So, how's it going? Outside of work? I mean, he raised an eyebrow, amused. You mean, do I have a life beyond rehearsals and lines? Surprisingly, yes. Not much of one, but it's there. I smirked. All right, Mr. Mysterious, tell me about it. He shrugged, taking a drink. Not much to tell. I mostly hang out with friends, catch a film now and then. What about you? You're the one always in the spotlight, right? I snorted. Yeah, right. If you call getting bossed around by Patrick the Spotlight, I paused, tapping my fingers against the glass. Can I ask you something? Nick set down his beer, giving me a curious look. Sure, shoot. I hesitated, feeling my pulse quicken. This was it. I was dipping a toe into dangerous waters, but I had to know. That scene we shot. The kiss I started. Eyes fixed on the tabletop. Did it, I don't know, feel different to you? The question hung in the air between us. I risked a glance up, half expecting him to laugh it off, but he didn't. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Why, he asked quietly, did it feel different to you? I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. This was going off script fast. Yeah, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't stop thinking about it. Nick leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. For a moment, I thought he was going to shut me down, to tell me I was imagining things. Instead, he nodded slowly. You're not the only one. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected him to say that. So what does that mean, I asked, my hands tightening around the glass. I had no idea where this was going, only that I was now strapped in for the ride. It means, he said, leaning forward, his voice low and steady, we explore it. We see what this is, no rush, no pressure. If you're up for that. His words hung in the air, offering a lifeline and a risk all at once. I felt a mixture of relief and fear. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To dive into this uncertainty, to figure out what these feelings meant. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Yeah, I croaked out. I'm up for that. He smiled, the tension easing between us. Cool, he said, taking another swig of his beer. Then let's just hang out, no expectations, see what happens. Right, no expectations, I echoed, feeling a weird sense of calm settling over me. This was the start of something, and I didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was on the right track, like I wasn't running from this anymore. The rest of the night flowed easily. We talked, laughed, shared stories. It wasn't as heavy as I thought it would be. There were no grand confessions or awkward silences, just two guys hanging out, figuring things out one step at a time. As we left the bar, walking side by side into the cool night air, Nick bumped his shoulder against mine. So, tomorrow. Tomorrow, I agreed, grinning despite myself. I still had a million questions, doubts swirling in the back of my mind. But for now, I was content to take things slow, to explore whatever this was, one moment at a time. The next few weeks felt like living on a tightrope. Nick and I kept hanging out outside of rehearsals, grabbing drinks, playing video games, sharing laughs, normal stuff. We avoided labeling whatever was happening between us, but it was there, lurking just beneath the surface. Every time we met, every time we brushed shoulders or locked eyes, the tension grew, and it was driving me out of my damn mind. Rehearsals weren't much better. Patrick had us running scenes nonstop, pushing for intensity, and of course there were more kiss scenes. It was his style to capture authentic moments, as he liked to say. Each time Nick and I went through the motions, it felt less like acting and more like falling down a rabbit hole. "You're getting too into this," I muttered to myself one day, pacing in the studio's back room, where I'd gone to take a breather. My stomach was in knots, and my hands were clammy. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not with the way I felt every time Nick got close. The door creaked open, and I glanced up to see Nick standing there, arms crossed. "You all right?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes serious. "Yeah, I just needed a break," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. I couldn't meet his gaze, afraid of what he might see there. Nick sighed, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "We need to talk, Oliver." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. About what I asked, feigning ignorance, hoping to avoid the conversation that was now glaringly unavoidable. "You know what he said?" Crossing the room until he was standing right in front of me. "This thing between us, we can't just keep acting like it's not there." My breath caught. There it was, he'd said it. I'd spent weeks trying to ignore it, to push down the storm inside me, and now here he was, dragging it all into the light. I backed up, shaking my head. "Nick, we agreed, no pressure, no expectations." "And we're still doing that," he shot back, not missing a beat. "But you're acting like this doesn't matter." "And it does. It's messing with you, I can tell." I opened my mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. He was right. I was a wreck, torn between wanting to keep things simple and wanting more. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms over my chest. "So, what do you want me to say?" I asked, my voice tight. "I want you to be honest with me," he replied, stepping closer, his eyes searching mine, "because I'm done pretending. I like you, Oliver. And I think you feel the same, but you're too scared to admit it." His words hit me like a freight train, crashing through every wall I'd built around myself. I clenched my jaw, looking away. "I don't know what I feel," I muttered. "I've never felt like this before, all right? I'm not like you. I can't just..." Just what Nick interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Can't just take a chance? Can't let yourself want something, even if it scares the hell out of you?" "Yes," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "That's exactly it. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, and it's terrifying." Nick was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving my face. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that, but you're not doing this alone." You know, he reached out, his hand brushing mine. It was a small, tentative touch, but it sent a jolt of warmth through me. I glanced at him, my defenses cracking. "And what if I mess this up?" I whispered, the fear finally spilling out. "What if I screw everything up?" He squeezed my hand gently. "Then we deal with it, together. That's what this is about, isn't it? Figuring it out, one step at a time." His words settled over me like a lifeline. My chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from the hope that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to have it all figured out right now, that it was okay to be unsure, to want something without knowing where it would lead. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay," I breathed out, meeting his gaze, "but I can't promise I won't freak out sometimes." Nick grinned, his eyes lighting up. "Trust me, I wouldn't expect anything less." For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease a bit. I wasn't in this alone. We were both figuring it out as we went, and that was okay. Patrick poked his head in just then, his timing as impeccable as always. "You two done with your heart-to-heart?" he asked, his tone half joking. "I need you back on set." I glanced at Nick, who gave me a slight nod. "Yeah," I said, standing up straighter. "We're good." We walked out of the room together, side by side. The air between us was still charged with uncertainty, but it wasn't the unbearable tension it had been. It was something new, possibility. Maybe. We still had no idea what we were doing, but we were doing it together. Back on set, we resumed the scene, the script momentarily forgotten as we moved through the lines. I felt Nick's presence beside me, steady and real. As we hit our marks, the familiar rhythm of acting kicking in, I realized that for now that was enough. We'd take this one step at a time and see where it led. Things started to shift after that conversation. We didn't have everything figured out, but we'd stopped pretending this thing between us didn't exist. It felt freeing, in a way like a weight lifting off my chest. Rehearsals became less about avoiding Nick and more about working through the tension, but that only made it more intense. Patrick kept throwing us into scenes filled with raw emotion, pushing us to our limits. Today was no different. We were in the studio running a scene where Nick and I had to confront each other full of shouting accusations and naturally another kiss. The entire thing was written to be explosive, and I was already on edge by the time we started. "You're not listening to me," I shouted, throwing my hands up, leaning into the character's rage. "And why the hell should I?" Nick fired back, stepping closer, his eyes blazing with anger that almost seemed real. "You've done nothing but push me away." "Cut," Patrick yelled, standing up from his director's chair. "Stop." He walked toward us, eyes narrowed in frustration. "You two are holding back. I need more. There's anger here, sure, but there's also desire. You're not just mad at each other, you want each other. Show me that." My heart raced, the words hitting me like a punch. Patrick knew exactly how to push my buttons. I glanced at Nick, who was already watching me, his expression unreadable. "You got this?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for me. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. "Yeah," I muttered, trying to steady my breathing. "Let's do it." We reset, and Patrick called for action. I felt the adrenaline kick in as I threw myself back into the scene. "You think you know me?" I growled, stepping right into Nick's space, our faces inches apart. "You don't know a damn thing." Nick didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto mine, fierce and unwavering. "Maybe I do, and maybe you're just too scared to admit it," he shot back, voice cracking with emotion. Time slowed. The script said I was supposed to shove him away in anger, but in that moment it was like the words had melted away. The line between the characters and us blurred. I stared at him, heart pounding, breath shallow. Then, without thinking, I grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him in, crashing my lips against his. This kiss wasn't scripted, wasn't choreographed. It was raw and desperate, like a dam breaking inside me. I could feel his surprise, the brief hesitation, and then he was kissing me back just as fiercely. Everything else faded. The studio, Patrick, the cameras, it was just us, caught in this electric, chaotic whirlwind. "Cut." Patrick's voice sliced through the air, snapping us back to reality. I pulled away, breathless, eyes wide, the taste of him still lingering on my lips. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. "Holy shit," Patrick muttered, running a hand through his hair. That was real." Nick stepped back, his gaze still locked on mine. I could see the question in his eyes, the mix of confusion and something deeper. I turned away, trying to get a grip on the chaos swirling inside me. What the hell had just happened? I hadn't meant to kiss him like that. Not for real. "Take 5, Patrick called out to the crew, giving us a chance to regroup. I walked off to the side, grabbing a water bottle, my hands shaking. This was too much. The lines were blurring in ways I hadn't expected. I felt Nick approach before I saw him, his presence unmistakable. "Oliver," he said softly, and I forced myself to look at him. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to figure out what the hell was going on in my head. "What was that?" I don't know," I stammered, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. I got caught up in the scene. "It wasn't. I didn't mean." "Stop," he interrupted, holding up a hand. "Don't do that. Don't brush this off like it was just the scene." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You kissed me, really kissed me, and wasn't acting." I opened my mouth to argue, to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. He was right. It wasn't just acting, and deep down I knew it. That kiss had been real, raw, and full of the emotions I'd been trying to ignore. Nick watched me, waiting, his expression both hopeful and uncertain. This was the moment, the turning point. I could keep running, hiding behind excuses and fear, or I could face us. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "You're right," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. It wasn't just acting. I kissed you because I wanted to. A mix of relief and something else flashed across his face. "So where do we go from here?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering. "I don't know," I confessed, feeling the weight of the uncertainty. "But I want to find out. If you're willing." A slow smile spread across his lips, his eyes softening. "I'm willing," he replied, reaching out to squeeze my arm. "But no more hiding. We face this together." I nodded, a surge of warmth flooding through me. This was it, the moment things changed. There was no turning back now. "All right," I said, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Together, then." Patrick clapped his hands, drawing our attention back to the set. "All right, lovebirds, break's over. Let's get back to work." I glanced at Nick, who just grinned. "Showtime," he murmured. "Yeah," I agreed, feeling a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. "Let's do this." As we walked back to our marks, I felt a calm settle over me. Things were still uncertain, still terrifying, but now I wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. It felt right. Patrick had us on a grueling shooting schedule, barely giving us time to catch our breath between takes. He was relentless, wanting to capture every ounce of raw emotion from us. Nick and I powered through, but there was a new energy now, something buzzing between us. We'd crossed a line and acknowledged it. The tension had shifted, but with it came a new challenge. Today's scene was the climax of the film, the big confrontation. In the script, we were supposed to break apart in a flurry of accusations, spilling secrets and doubts. Then, in a heated moment of vulnerability, we would fall into each other's arms. Patrick's favorite kind of scene, messy, emotional, and uncomfortably real. All right, you two, Patrick called out, standing beside the camera. Remember, this is it. The make or break moment. No holding back. Action. Nick and I faced each other, the room crackling with the tension that had been building for weeks. I stared into his eyes, the lines already blurring between our characters and us. This wasn't just acting. It hadn't been for a while now. You think this is easy for me, I yelled, stepping forward, getting right up in his face. My pulse raced, every word pouring out with more truth than I was comfortable admitting. When you think I just woke up one day and decided to feel this way? About you. Nick's eyes flashed and he pushed back, shoving me lightly on the chest. Then what do you want? Oliver, he shot back, voice tight with emotion. Because 1 minute you're all in and the next you're pulling away. I can't keep doing this back and forth with you. I clenched my jaw, my breathing ragged. I didn't need to search for the words, they were already there, buried deep in my gut. I don't know what I want, I shouted, my voice breaking. I'm terrified, all right? I'm terrified of what this means, of what it makes me. Silence crashed down around us. My heart pounded in my ears, the words hanging in the air, raw and real. Patrick was silent, and so was the set. All eyes locked on us. Nick swallowed, his face a mix of frustration and something else, something softer. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. It makes you human, he said quietly, and it scares the hell out of me too. But I'm standing here, aren't I? Waiting for you to decide if you'll let yourself feel this. I stared at him, my chest heaving. Everything inside me was screaming to run, to hide behind excuses and fear. But looking at him now, his eyes so open, so real, I knew I couldn't run anymore. Not from him, not from myself. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything crashing down at once. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I'm all in, no more half measures. Nick's eyes widened, and for a second I thought he might not believe me. But then he closed the distance between us, his hands gripping my arms. Say it again, he demanded, his voice thick with urgency. I need to hear you say it. I looked him straight in the eye, the fear melting away in the heat of the moment. I repeated, stronger this time. I'm all in, Nick. Without another word, he pulled me in, our lips crashing together in a kiss that shattered every barrier I'd built around myself. This was different from all the others, no hesitation, no second guessing. Just us, raw and real, with nothing left to hide. Cut Patrick's voice pierced through the haze, but this time it didn't matter. I barely registered his words. I stayed there, forehead resting against Nick's, our breathing heavy and in sync. Holy shit, Nick muttered, a shaky laugh escaping his lips. We actually did it. Yeah, I breathed out, my grip on his arms tightening. We did. Patrick approached, a grin spreading across his face. That was it. That was the scene. He gave us both a nod. Take 5, you've earned it. Nick and I stepped back, letting out deep breaths. The room was buzzing with activity as the crew moved around us. But all I could focus on was him. The storm inside me had quieted, replaced by a sense of clarity. I glanced at Nick, who was watching me with that familiar intensity. So I said, my voice still shaky, where do we go from here? He smiled, his eyes warm. We take it one step at a time. No scripts, no rehearsals. Just us. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. Just us, I echoed, finally allowing myself to believe that it could be enough. Patrick called us back to set, but this time as we walked side by side, it felt different. There was no more pretending, no more acting. We'd reached the turning point, and from here on out, it was real. And that was terrifying. But it was also everything I wanted. After that day, everything shifted. It wasn't like a movie moment where suddenly all our problems were solved, but it was real. It was us. We started navigating the waters of whatever this thing between us was without scripts or rehearsals to fall back on, and that came with its own set of challenges. The next morning, we sat in a corner booth at our favorite coffee shop, sipping on lattes in silence. It was our first time out together since the kiss, and the weight of our new reality hung in the air. I fiddled with my cup, not quite sure how to break the tension. So I started, glancing at Nick across the table. What now? He looked up, eyebrows raised, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. We drink coffee. We go to rehearsal. We live our lives. We figure this out as we go. His tone was calm, but his eyes held that intensity, that warmth I'd come to crave. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and nerves. Sounds simple enough. It is, and it isn't, he replied, setting his cup down. Look, Oliver, I'm not expecting you to have all the answers. Hell, I don't even have all the answers. I want us to be honest with each other. No more hiding. All right. I swallowed, feeling the truth of his words settle over me. All right, I agreed, my voice steady. No more hiding. We sat there for a moment, letting that promise sink in. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message. I glanced at the screen. It was Patrick, reminding us about tonight's rap party. You going, Nick asked, nodding at the phone. Yeah, I said, stuffing it back into my pocket. You? He shrugged. Wouldn't miss it. We should probably face the real world at some point, right? I laughed, the tension in my shoulders easing a bit. Guess so. Ready to show up as us. He grinned, leaning back in his seat. Yeah, I am. You. Yeah, I answered, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Let's do it. The wrap party was packed, the room buzzing with chatter and laughter. Patrick had gone all out, renting a loft space and filling it with music, drinks, and enough food to feed a small army. I felt a rush of anxiety as we walked in, Nick by my side. I wasn't sure how people would react, how they'd see us, but one look at Nick and I felt steadier. We navigated through the crowd, greeting castmates and crew, playing it cool. No one really seemed to notice anything different. They probably just thought we were here as friends like always. And for now, that was okay. Halfway through the night, Patrick found us. He had that knowing grin on his face, a glass of champagne in hand. "Look at you two," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Finally figured it out?" "Huh." I blinked, glancing at Nick, then back at Patrick. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning innocence. He snorted. "Please. I'm a director, I see things, and I've seen this brewing for weeks." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Just promise me one thing." I nodded, my heart hammering. "What's that?" "Don't screw it up," he said, his eyes flicking between us. "You've got something real here. Don't let fear or doubt ruin it." I swallowed hard, feeling Nick's hand brush against mine. I glanced at him, and he gave me a slight nod. "We won't," I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. "We're in this. Together." Patrick grinned, clapping us both on the shoulders. "Good, now go enjoy yourselves." With that, he disappeared back into the crowd, leaving us standing there. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Well, I muttered, turning to Nick. "Guess we're not as subtle as we thought." He laughed, shaking his head. "Nope, but does it really matter?" I looked around the room at all the people celebrating, laughing, just living. Then I looked back at Nick, at the way he stood there, so steady and real. "No," I admitted, feeling a wave of calm wash over me. "It doesn't." And we grabbed a couple of drinks and made our way to a quieter corner. As we sat down, I felt an odd sense of peace settle over me. This was it, our new normal. No grand declarations or perfect endings, just two people figuring it out one day at a time. Nick raised his glass, a soft smile on his face. "To us," he said, his eyes locked onto mine. "To whatever this is, and wherever it goes." I clinked my glass against his, a smile spreading across my lips. "To us," I echoed, letting the words sink in. This was real. It was ours. As the night went on, we mingled, laughed, and just were together. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd ever expected. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, with exactly who I needed to be with. The days following the wrap party were a whirlwind. Life moved forward as it always did, but now there was a new rhythm to it. Nick and I had settled into our version of normal. We still went to rehearsals, still hung out with our friends, but there was an unspoken change, a quiet certainty between us. It felt right. But of course, real life isn't as tidy as a movie script. There were moments of doubt, of awkwardness, times when I'd catch myself wondering if this was all too good to be true. And then there was the conversation I'd been putting off telling my family. The idea alone was enough to twist my stomach into knots, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. One evening, I sat on my couch, phone in hand, staring at my mom's contact. Nick was in the kitchen making us coffee, glancing over every few seconds as I wrestled with the decision. He didn't push, he never did. He just waited, offering me the quiet strength I was beginning to rely on. I exhaled slowly and hit the call button before I could overthink it. The phone rang, and then her voice came through, warm and familiar. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you?" "Hey, Mom," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm good. Listen, there's something I need to tell you." The pause on the other end was almost imperceptible, but I felt it. "All right," she said cautiously. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath, my eyes flicking to Nick, who was watching me with quiet encouragement. "So you remember my friend Nick?" I began, my heart pounding. "Well, he's more than just a friend." The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, waiting for her to say something, anything, and then finally she spoke. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice softening. "Is that what's been on your mind lately?" "Yeah," I admitted, my throat tight. "I've been scared to tell you." "Why?" she asked gently. "You're my son. Nothing changes that." Her words hit me like a wave, the relief washing over me. I blinked back, tears struggling to find my voice. I didn't know how you'd react, I confessed. "This is new for me too." "I know," she said, her tone firm but loving, "and it's okay to be figuring things out. I'm proud of you, Oliver, for being honest, for being you." A knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying unraveled in my chest. "Thanks, Mom," I choked out, a laugh escaping as I wiped my eyes. "That means a lot." We talked for a few more minutes, about Nick, about everything. When I finally hung up, I looked over at him, my heart still racing but lighter somehow. "Well," he asked, handing me a mug of coffee, his eyes searching mine. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment. She's okay with it," I said, the words tasting like freedom. "She's proud of me." Nick grinned, that infectious smile of his lighting up the room. "Told you," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "You worry too much." Yeah, I muttered, taking the coffee. "Don't get cocky." And he laughed, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. Too late for that. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. I introduced Nick to more of my life. and he did the same. We navigated the ups and downs, the awkward moments, and the unexpected joys. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was real, and it was ours. One night, we sat on the couch, watching some mindless TV show, the kind where the plot didn't matter, and we could just relax. I glanced over at him, his face lit by the glow of the screen. He caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," I said, grinning. "Just thinking." "Dangerous," he teased, nudging me. "What about?" "About how we got here," I admitted, the words coming out before I could stop them. "How one kiss in a scene turned into this." He nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah, it's been a ride, hasn't it?" "Hell of a ride," I agreed, turning back to the TV. "But a good one." We sat there in comfortable silence, his hand finding mine and giving it a squeeze. It was such a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. This was what it meant to be in it together. No grand gestures, no sweeping declarations, just the small everyday moments that made up a life. So he said, breaking the silence, "What's next for us?" I thought about it, about everything we'd been through, the fears we'd faced and the truths we'd uncovered. "We keep going," I said simply. "Day by day. No scripts, no rehearsals, just us." He smiled, his eyes locking onto mine. "Sounds like a plan." And it did. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with the uncertainty, with the not knowing. We didn't have all the answers, but we didn't need them. We had each other, and that was enough. As we settled back into the couch, his head resting on my shoulder, I felt a warmth spread through me. It wasn't a perfect ending, because it wasn't ending at all. It was just the beginning of something messy, beautiful, and real, and that was more than I'd ever hoped for.